What's up, guys? We should be live. If you can see and hear me, as always, let me know in the chat, please. Looks like we've got a few people here, so that's good. Let me bring in our special guest for today that I didn't announce was going to be here because we weren't sure if he was going to make it. Everyone, please welcome Dr. Ash. And
Hey,
Christine will be here, but she'll be here in just a few minutes. So Ash and I can get started. So if you didn't come to the previous one, just a quick, overview of what we're doing here. This is the Outlier Deep Dive Live series. Initially, I was thinking we would do it once or twice a month, but it looks like we're going to be doing it every week, at least for now, because we've already decided we're going to do one next week too. So last week we talked about how to learn Chinese characters. That was really good. If you haven't watched that, go back and check it out. This week we're talking about how to improve your listening comprehension, and specifically we're going to also talk about the Get Listening Mandarin podcast and how you can use that to help you improve your listening comprehension. Next week we will talk about improving your speaking ability, your fluency, your fluidity. So yeah, that's the series. We're going to be doing a lot more of these, I think. So if there's specific topics that you want us to cover, let us know. We have some topics in mind, but of course we want to do what you guys will find useful. So, yeah. Dr. Ash, how did you work on your listening comprehension?
well, I did a couple of things. One thing I did was learn massive amount of vocabulary. There's a challenge to Mandarin that you don't have with like some Western languages, like Spanish, for instance. I had like 3 years of that in school when I was a kid, but I don't really know a lot of words, and I only know the grammar that I had in those 3 years. But when I see or hear a sentence, I can tell you, oh, that's a verb, that's a noun, that's an adjective. But you can't do that in Mandarin. You can, but you have to know everything in the sentence to know that, because in Mandarin it's word order that's super important. It's word order that in linguistics they call them syntactic slots. So you have a certain slot that your subject goes into, then your verb, and then so on and so forth. So learning massive amounts of vocabulary, which I spent a long time doing, that's one thing. Another thing you can do is really work on your pronunciation. And that might seem kind of counterintuitive, but the more you master pronunciation, the more that wall of sound coming at you feels less like a wall of sound and more like words. And also because I think the theme of this topic or this talk is improving your speaking. And
Wait, this is listening.
Oh, it's listening?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, then I'll do a quick free public service announcement
for the next one.
Yeah. Improving your pronunciation, it's not just a matter of it helping you to be understood by native speakers. It is that. And you want to have, at the very minimum, you want to have clear pronunciation. Now, if you want to have perfect pronunciation or not, depends on how much work you're wanting to put into it and what your goals are and all that stuff. But at the very least, you want to talk clearly so that when people listen to you, they don't have to struggle to understand what you're saying. And a lot of new beginners don't do that, and they have this, whatever language they're coming from, they have that heavy accent going on. And like, as someone who's been speaking Mandarin for decades, like I make a point to look at native speakers and their body language when they come across somebody who has really bad accent. And I can tell you what, they get nervous. Their bodies tense up, they grab onto whatever's around them. And they're like, oh no, what do I do now? Because they're too polite to They don't even want to ask you, what did you say? But they're just struggling to figure it out because the
Yeah.
pronunciation's off. So clearly, mastering pronunciation will help you with that. But that's not actually the main thing it does. One of the main things, mastering pronunciation, when I say master, I mean you say a sound and it's say, you can choose your level of accuracy, 95% accurate, 80%, 85%, whatever. I would recommend at least 90%, but 90% accurate or above. And you can say this without thinking about it. And man, what that does is free up your brain. If you're thinking about how do I pronounce words while you're talking, that's taken a huge amount of your brain power away from focusing on what you're going to say and how you're going to say it. And that doesn't even necessarily entail grammar. I mean, if you've mastered grammar and you internalize it, then you won't have to think about that. You just think about the words in your presentation, which is where you want to be, right? That's what a native speaker thinks about. They're not thinking about the pronunciation, thinking about what am I going to say? How's it best to explain this topic to this audience and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So what I'm saying here is pronunciation is super, super important. It's not just important for being clearly understood, which it is important for, but it's also to lower the amount of thinking you have to do when you're talking. And then also when you're listening, if you understand the pronunciation really well, you can just understand what native speakers are saying much better because it becomes more of an impression rather than you're trying to fight through this. Okay, was that a B or a P or an I? Is it a B, a P, an I? And then you're not thinking about that. You're actually clearly hearing these words, right? So
Yeah.
pronunciation is a key component to basically everything else.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. Both of those are really good points. Like something that I think is really different with Mandarin versus like if you're learning Spanish or something is you kind of hinted at this, but if you're trying to listen to Spanish, you can figure out what words are which function because you've got conjugations that you can listen for. You've got, all these sort of like indicators that you can listen for to figure out what word is doing which role. But none of that exists in Mandarin. And so that's, yeah.
Which on the one hand would make you think it's easier, but it actually makes it much more difficult.
Yeah.
Like I learned basically to read Dutch in about 3 months. And then after learning about 10 months, I went to the Netherlands, and within a month, I could interpret church services in real time.
Mm.
I would not feel comfortable doing that in Mandarin today. And I like,
Yeah.
yeah, it's really because you miss one sound in Mandarin, and man, there's so much information density on one syllable of speech. And in fact, I believe this is why they have Chinese subtitles in Chinese movies.
Mm. That
Because some people say, oh, it's because
that's not
grandma speaks
lost.
Taiyu and whatever, but
Right.
I just don't believe that they have subtitles for everybody all the time because grandma might not speak Mandarin well.
Mm.
And if she can't speak Mandarin well, chances are she can't read it well either, which goes against the subtitle story. But
Right. All right. Our other guest is here. Let me bring her in. Hey, it worked.
hey,
Hello.
Christine.
Christine. So a
Hi,
question
everyone.
for both of you, and this will be interesting doing this way today because Ash is a longtime learner. Christine is coming from the other side teaching, but she's also learning other languages. And can you just do more listening and improve your listening comprehension? Is that adequate? Or is that taking the long route?
As for a language learner for myself, when I was learning English for myself, listening did help me a lot. I listened to a lot of content.
Right.
TV series, movies, music, news, TED Talks, all of them, all sorts of resources.
Yeah.
It did help me for my pronunciation, for my speaking, for the allocations, for everything, almost everything. So I would say listening does help.
Yeah. I mean, it helps, right? But is the prescription just do more listening? I
No.
mean, will that cover all ills? Right? You need
No,
some,
you need to
right?
learn. You need to learn vocabulary and structures along the way,
Mm,
so that can help you understand more.
yeah.
And then you can just, after you have certain vocabulary and grammar structures, you'll be able to actually understand the content rather than focusing on vocabulary. And then you can enjoy the content.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah, for
for
sure.
me, listening, not all listening is equally useful. And then some types of listening require other types of listening before that type of listening becomes useful. And so what do I mean by that? Well, take for instance, I'm listening to a podcast while I'm doing my homework or while I'm vacuuming the room. Right? That kind of listening can be useful, but it can only be useful if you've done concentrated listening at some other time. Like, so say I take a podcast and I sit down and I listen to it with my notepad and I'm writing down words I don't know and I'm writing down ideas I don't know or maybe grammar patterns. And I'm going line by line through this whole podcast and I've really paid close attention to it. And I want to review that. Well, then, when you're cleaning your room, reviewing the thing's fine doing that. But if that's the first time you're listening to it, it's not just going to magically crawl into your head, which is it seems like a lot of people feel like it's just gonna magically. I'm gonna listen, and while I'm sleeping or whatever, when I'm not paying attention, it's gonna magically get into my head. Maybe it will, but if it is, it's gonna take decades to do so. So it's not that kind of listening is only good if you've done the concentrated listening.
Yeah.
So concentrated listening is highly recommended, and it happens to be part of practicing pronunciation. So, so you can kill two birds with one stone.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that's kind of the approach we take in our movie courses, right? Is like listen in detail, break down a scene in its entirety, and then, work through it until you can understand every single line. And then you can use it as comprehensible input, right? But I think a lot of people with this
Yeah,
comprehensible input thing, they think, oh, just put on a bunch of Chinese audio in the background and listen to it, and you'll absorb over time. And it's like, you might absorb some, but it's not comprehensible if you're not understanding like 98% of it already, right? Well, how do you get there? Work through it line by line until you understand 98% of it. And then
yeah,
it's useful as comprehensible input. So like that's the approach we're taking with the movies, and what I did when I was doing movies like intensively when I lived in Taiwan was, you know, let's turn this thing into comprehensible input, and then putting it on in the background is super useful.
yeah. Actually, there's a comment here I'd like to read.
Yeah.
So it says, if by structure you mean functional structures, then by all means, but formal structures are meaningless. Like noun phrase plus verb phrase plus noun phrase means nothing. And I would agree with that wholeheartedly. Like I've mentioned several times on these type of things, I used to work for Far East, the publisher in Taiwan, and they would like we had our own internal messaging system. So I would get messages from people all over the company, but people would often like write me and say, "Hey Ash, here's a sentence structure," and it'd be like subject one plus verb one plus conjunction one plus subject two plus verb two plus, and it was this whole long thing. And it's like I have a PhD in linguistics, and I see that, and I can't connect that to English.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, formally I can. Like, if you give me a sentence, I could go and map it out the way they mapped it out. But if I look at that, it's just chart. It's just nonsense. So
Yeah.
what I told him, I said, no, I'm not doing that because I'm not going to do the effort it takes me to convert that thing to a sentence that makes sense to me. I
Right.
said, what I want you to do, give me an English sentence or one for each structure you want to show. Give me an English sentence, and then I'll take that sentence and create 10 just like it that are with different words.
Yep.
And So what am I doing? I'm taking something meaningless, throwing it back. I say, give me something meaningful, and I'll take that meaningful thing and turn it into a bunch of other meaningful things.
Yeah.
But it's super hard to do that. Well, because also this is in the grammar space, and native speakers don't think of their own language in the grammar space. They think of it in the meaning space.
Yeah.
So grammar is only useful insofar as it allows you to express certain meanings in ways that are common to native speakers, right?
Yeah.
So the fact that it's a subject doesn't matter for anything, right? And we do this with our character stuff too. Like you get these really abstract categories, and you try to explain it to somebody, and you end up using a bunch of words, and they still don't know what you're talking about. So like if I try to tell somebody what a verb is, I mean that's not super hard, but if I say give me a word that represents a state of being, or give me a word that represents an action, anybody, even a 5-year-old kid could tell you.
Yeah.
But if you're like, give me an example of a verb, some people could do that, some people can't do that. Yeah. So anyway, that comment is right on.
Yeah, for sure. It can be useful once you have like just like any abstraction. It can be useful if you have a bunch of examples, that you're trying to understand. Then breaking down the sentence in that sort of way can be helpful. But starting like memorizing a bunch of sentence pattern formulas like that in the abstract is not, when it's certainly not something, obviously we're talking about listening today, but it's not something that you can use to speak. Like a lot of people think if you have these sentence patterns memorized and then you slot words into them, that's what speaking is. But that's just not the case.
Yeah,
I don't think
it's much better to have an actual sentence.
Yep.
Go ahead, Christine.
like in our podcast, in one of our episodes was talking about how to ask for directions, or how to ask for positions and directions. So I gave a lot of useful sentences and just switch places. So I think that would be a better approach
Mm-hmm.
to memorize how you're going to say it, rather than just remembering the structure with the grammatical terms rather than actual words. Those are not helpful.
Yeah.
Because your brain can actually categorize them later.
Yeah. Yeah.
If it needs to.
It needs to.
Mm.
Yeah. And if it doesn't need to, then
If you know
Don't
how
need
to
it.
say it, then it's fine.
Right. So something I wanted to talk about too was like, I think a common frustration we hear is like, well, certainly in the movie courses, for example, people are like, I need the subtitles because if I can read the subtitles, then I can understand what's being said, right? So there's a huge gap between reading comprehension and listening comprehension, right? Part of that's because you have infinite time to read, whereas listening, once the sound is gone, it's gone. Maybe you have a rewind button or something, but there's a huge temporal difference. But like what else do you think affects that? Why is it that reading feels so much easier and listening feels so hard?
well, I
I think
think
while
you
you're
nailed it.
reading,
I mean, go ahead.
you're reading the subtitles, you're reasoning the meaning in your mind, but there's a lag in your head from what's actually going on in the movie. There's always a time difference.
Yeah.
So sometimes you miss a lot of detail. I remember when I was watching English movies in Taiwan when growing up, I would laugh at jokes that it was not translated by subtitles.
Mm.
Those are the things that you will miss
Yeah.
if you don't listen
Yeah.
and only count on the subtitles.
I was always entertained when watching English language movies in Taiwan, like at movie theaters, and they have the Chinese subtitles, right? And the audience would laugh at a joke before it's been said. because they read it in the subtitles before the actor says it.
So people
I
will
one
laugh at
time,
different points.
Yeah.
yeah, I was with a group of people that was a mixture of Chinese speakers and English speakers, and some of the Chinese speakers couldn't speak English, and some of the English speakers couldn't speak Chinese. And we watched a movie, and the movie was in Mandarin, and we had the English and Chinese subtitles on at the same time, and it was like three separate movies. Each the spoken language was different from what was written down, and the English was different from the Chinese, like to the point that it was like three movies were going on at the same time. It was bizarre.
Mm.
Somebody asked here,
This is a good question. Yeah.
the listening, yeah, the second generation or next generation have pretty good listening comprehension, but are not good at speaking.
From my experience, from my students, it's because they didn't practice speaking at all.
Yeah.
They refuse to say it. And that's why they have really, really good listening. No problem.
Right.
But they didn't want to, I would say in the beginning, they didn't want to speak. They didn't want to use the language. And then later on, they don't have the confidence to reproduce the sound they heard.
Yeah.
And they will feel that
Yeah.
the sound they make or the words they speak, the word they spoke are different from what they heard.
Yeah.
So that would pull them back. That's the problem.
Yeah, for sure.
So yeah, the confidence in speaking comes from that practice. It's not that you look in the mirror and you go, I can do this. It's that, well, maybe you do that before you have to do your practicing, but you have to say it. You have to develop the muscle memory. And if you've said this word 100 times and you've been listening to what a native speaker sounds like, and you're comparing yourself so you know what you sound like at that point. Like if you don't know what your accent sounds like, that's because you haven't been comparing yourself to a native speaker. So you have to do that comparison. You have to do that daily practice to build the muscle memory, because that's where your confidence is going to come from. Otherwise, it's false confidence.
Yep.
Right. And then another point is that you have to practice the thing you want to get good at. So if you want to get good at speaking, you need to practice speaking. Now, somebody might say, well, but when I was in college, I would read books and that would improve my speaking. Okay, that's true, but why is that true? It's true because you're using your native language. You have high level comprehension, a high level mastery of the spoken language, and a high level mastery of the written language. So you've already mastered all these things, so switching in between them is easy, right? But if I'm still learning how to speak and I don't know how to pronounce everything because I haven't done my practicing, me reading, even if it puts it in my head, I still have that disconnect from the characters in my head to the pronunciation coming out of my mouth, right? So you have to close those gaps between your listening, speaking, reading, etc.
Yeah, I think especially with heritage speakers, what I've heard a lot is like, there's when you're a kid, right, and your parents are speaking Chinese to you, you don't want to speak Chinese back, right? Because you don't fit in. You're different, right? You're surrounded by English speakers or Spanish speakers or wherever you live, right? And there's this immense pressure on kids to try to fit in, and so them speaking Chinese makes them weird, or they feel like it makes them weird, right? And so they don't do it. And then, yeah, like Christine said, when they get older, then they can listen just fine because they've been listening to their parents, talk to them or yell at them or whatever their whole lives, but they've actively avoided speaking. And so then, they get to, college or adulthood or whatever, and they're not able to speak very well unless they've taken the time to fix that. So, yeah, like it's bridging that gap, getting a bunch of practice in, a bunch of imitation, building up automaticity. And like, we have another comment a little further down. Your throat, and not just your throat, it's your mouth, your tongue, everything is a muscle that has to be developed in order to speak well, right? people ignore the physical aspect of learning languages. They think of it, generally, people think of it as an intellectual exercise, right? But it's totally a physical exercise, and it really requires a lot of training and developing muscle memory in order to speak well. So,
Let me say something about that comment.
yeah.
They say also in that comment, sound goes way beyond consonants and vowels, and that is 100% true. And in fact,
Yeah.
I would say sentence, if you want to be recognized by somebody as a native speaker, you absolutely have to have the cadence and the sentence intonation down. If you don't, you're going to sound weird. Like, I have a funny anecdote. Like, a German friend of mine in Taiwan was wanting to learn some Texan. So I was trying to teach him how to say, them's fighting words, boy. And he would say, them's fighting words, boy. I'm like, no, that is absolutely not what I'm saying. I'm saying, them's fighting words, boy. Them's fighting words, boy. It's like, this isn't going anywhere. Because if he were to actually use that the way he said it, chances are, if a native speaker, they would just start laughing because it's such a bizarre. The intonation is so absolutely out the window. Yeah, it doesn't, and it's supposed to be a threatening thing. You know, you're trying to threaten somebody, but you're saying it in such a goofy way that it just becomes funny.
Yeah. That's not about the words. It's, that intonation is part of the threat.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And another very interesting thing on these lines is that they did a study on babies, in French countries, or French speaking countries, and in German speaking. And it turns out that when they cry, babies will actually mimic the sentence intonation of their native language.
Yep.
So when the French babies cried, it was different than the German babies crying.
French babies cried
and it had to do with the
German babies cried down.
Yeah, it was up.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what it was.
And German babies.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that tells you right there, if an infant is already, I mean, of course, paying attention. I'm not sure I would use that word, but on some level, I guess they are. Yeah. They're somehow, but the first thing they're absorbing is the sentence intonation before they get the words, before they get the consonants, before they get all that other stuff, which tells me that stuff's really important.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, well, didn't you have a friend that spoke, was it Mandarin or English, and sounded like a native speaker until you listened in more detail to her pronunciation?
Yeah. A Taiwanese friend of mine, like if you sat back and didn't listen to what she was saying, she sounded like a native English speaker. But if you listened to anything she was saying, it was completely Taiwanese. So it was the weirdest dichotomy that when you paid attention, it absolutely sounded nothing like a native English speaker. And when I say that, I mean her consonants and vowels were very, very Taiwanese, but her intonation was actually English intonation.
Yep.
But she's since gone and lived in England for 10 years, so who knows what it sounds like now, but because she was doing American English before that.
But yeah, like having the intonation down will absolutely override people's perception of you as a non-native speaker. Like,
yeah,
I think it counts for more than consonants and vowels.
It definitely does.
Yeah.
If you take a person with perfect consonants and vowels, but their intonation is slightly off, they will always be viewed as a non-native speaker. Yep. If you take somebody who has perfect intonation, but their consonants and vowels are slightly off, most of the time people will still view them as native speakers.
Yep.
That's because most of the native speakers, they don't have perfect consonants and vowels. They have good intonation, but not perfect consonants and vowels.
Right.
Some of them, like my students always told me, 老师, what I've heard on the street is different from what you said. So that's
our teachers would deny
totally
that.
Different.
No.
I think we lost Ash.
A little bit, yep.
Yeah. But I think I know what he was going to say. Basically, it was really common for Chinese teachers to just they would either say like, no, you didn't hear what you think you heard. People out there, they're speaking correct Mandarin, or they would go like, the local Taiwanese people, their Mandarin is wrong. Don't listen to them. And it's like, well, that's not helpful. I'm living here in Taiwan.
Yeah, those are the actual language people are using.
Right. Yeah. Let me message Ash and see. Maybe we should get him to rejoin.
Okay. Also, while we're waiting for Ash, I would recommend everybody, even if you're not learning for a Taiwanese accent, you can still listen to my podcast and try to differentiate the difference from my pronunciation and the PRC accent. And if you can try to use your throat muscle, or you can try to mimic the sound, then you will know what's the difference and where you're gonna use your muscle to make that sound, to make the pronunciation right. Because for a lot of native speakers like us, it is also hard for us to mimic different accent. We could understand, we could tell the difference. We could tell, oh, maybe they're from which part.
Right.
But not everybody can try all different accents. And I think that's a very good practice for you to practice your pronunciation, and especially for tones.
Yeah.
For example, in Taiwan or in China, for different dialects, some of the words, they have different tones. So it's very interesting that, let's say, for Sichuan dialect, it is the closest one to 普通话. So Sichuan dialect is always one of my goals to practice, because they just change tones for certain words and slightly different pronunciation for different vowels and not consonant, basically vowels. So if you can master that, then you would know how to switch back to the correct one. That's my opinion about that.
Yeah. Yeah. So we're talking a lot about pronunciation, but that's because, as Ash said early on, I think it was before you joined, Christine, that will fix a lot of your listening comprehension problems. I think we've lost Ash again. He's frozen. And I have some thoughts on that. Like, I don't know, maybe a professional linguist might disagree or might formulate this differently. But my way of thinking about this is that when you're learning a language, you are starting to install some mental model of what the language sounds like. And at first, there's strong influence from your native language, right? And over time, you get some mix of your native language influence and whatever textbooks you're using and whatever, right? But if you haven't spent a lot of time fixing your pronunciation, your mental model is likely whatever your own pronunciation is like, right? So if you've got a strong accent in Chinese, that's probably what you're hearing in your head, right? Because otherwise you wouldn't have such a strong accent. So when you go out and you're listening to native speakers, you have this weird non-native model of the language in your mind. And what you hear, your brain has to map that onto that mental model, right? So obviously the closer your mental model is to a native accent, the better, the more easily you'll be able to understand what you're hearing, because your brain is going to have to spend less effort trying to map it. All right, we're getting messages from Ash. His internet is wonky. I think we figured that out. All right, he's back. Yeah, and so fixing your pronunciation and doing a lot of intensive imitation of native speakers will fix that mental model, and then you'll you know, I, I describe it as a wall, right? It felt like a wall because I would talk to native speakers, I would understand them, but it took a lot of mental processing to understand them. So that was the wall, was that gap. And then after I spent a few months chorusing and shadowing intensively, um, some, a Taiwanese movie, because I wanted a Taiwanese accent, um, I found my listening comprehension skyrocketed and I didn't have to spend so much mental effort. And I think it's just that wall came down. And so that we have a good point here. Oh, not that one. We had a lot of variations in Chinese, different ways to pronounce, right? I don't really want to learn a dialect. I prefer standard Chinese. That's fine. Having any sort of native accent in your head, native sounding mental model, is what you want. I mean, if you want the standard PRC Mandarin, there's absolutely, that's a it's a great choice actually. It's probably um, the most universal choice. You'll be the most widely understood. But there's other accents too that are widely understood, like a nice clear Taipei accent. Everyone understands that with no problem. Shanghai accent,
Also,
no problem.
if you speak with a Taipei accent, it'll be easily understood, and you'll also easily be able to understand standard PRC
Yeah,
Mandarin. But the problem is, most people, I think, don't speak standard PRC Mandarin.
right.
Most people have some effect from wherever they grew up.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
that's definitely another wrinkle to the whole listening comprehension thing in Mandarin, right? Is how many different accents you need to be able to understand, right? I mean, obviously, if you're living in a place that speaks Mandarin natively, that's going to be your priority. Like I was living in Taipei, I wanted to understand people in Taipei, right? Um, I wanted to understand people from Beijing also, but that was a lower priority. Um, So yeah, if you're living there, it's good to focus on the local accent wherever you are, and also learn, standard. Um, Always try to learn the most international version of a language. Yeah, that's nothing wrong with that.
I would suggest you learn the standard version first,
Sure.
and then you can go to the variations
Yeah.
because it's always easier to go from the standard way to the variation, not the reverse way. We have some students learn the original accent or pronunciation first, and later I found that it's hard for them to come back to the standard way.
Mm.
So that can be problematic.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's good that you can understand it, but not that doesn't mean that you need to speak in that way.
Yeah.
Let's put it that
Well,
way.
yeah, yeah, that's a good point because okay, say you're living in some town in rural southern Taiwan, right? And you got a lot of Taiwan Guoyu accent that you're surrounded by. Does that mean that you should start saying "he ka hui, zuo hui ji"? You know, no, that's probably not a good idea as a non-native speaker. You do need to be able to understand it, but the issue with that would be you go anywhere else and they're gonna go, wait, what? Why does this non-native speak? Why does he sound like that? I've run into that. I saw a recording of a guy that he was a white American dude and had a strong Taiwan Goryeo accent, and it was odd. And then it's also like if you're wanting to talk to native speakers from other places, it makes it more difficult for them to understand you, right? So the more standard, or at least the more your pronunciation resembles some prestige dialect of the language, right? Whether it's Beijing, Taipei, or Shanghai, or whatever, um, the easier time you're going to have, making yourself understood. So, um,
We have a comment asking, did I write the content for the podcast?
oh yeah, yeah, yes. This is all
Yes,
Christine's doing.
I design all the content. I would like to share that because at first I wanted to say something that most of the language learning content are focusing on the language skills and learning languages. But I also found that these days people are stressful, and even when you're learning languages. So I want to create something that you can relax while you're still kind of learning. So
Yeah,
that's the basic idea for that.
yeah, she got the idea when some of our I forget which course it was. Was it GSM 2 or 3?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, were saying that they were frustrated by lack of listening focused material of podcasts. So I think within a few days of them saying that, Christine was like, "Hey, I have an idea. Let's do a podcast." And yeah, she's done 60 episodes so far. We're taking a short break from posting new episodes to the community, although new episodes are being posted to the podcast platforms because we haven't caught up with all 60 yet. But yeah, there's 60 episodes. There's different levels from, we call it foundations, basic, intermediate, advanced, and mastery. Foundations is like HSK 1 or 2 level. Mastery is HSK 5 and above. And above and above, you know.
For the newer HSK, it's around HSK 7 to 9.
Yep.
For that category.
So we'll have stuff in mastery that fits that sort of level, right? So yeah, and let's see. Yeah, it is a great idea. She's done a really nice job with it. And the cool thing is you can, we originally conceived of it as just something you can kind of put on in the background, practice your listening comprehension, but also you can use it for more intensive work, right? So if you want to work through line by line, we have free transcripts in our community. If you're not in the community, there's a link in the description where you can join. But you can take those transcripts and work through any sentence that you don't understand and get yourself to the point of understanding it, like I was talking about earlier, so that it becomes comprehensible input. So yeah, native Taiwanese friend likes to listen to mastery level. That's awesome.
That's kind of my goal when originally designed the mastery level, because I thought that that should be the content that works for both native speaker and language learners. Because for the highest level, for language learners, they want to aim for content that's the same to native speaker.
Yeah.
Actually, myself really enjoyed the mastery content as well for the stories. Sometimes I really like the stories. Sometimes it's very relaxing for us reading those stories.
Yeah, it's really good stuff. It's graded, and the levels, for those of you who know our Get Speaking courses, the levels correspond. So foundations is Get Speaking 1, basic is Get Speaking 2, intermediate is Get Speaking 3, and then we've got Get Speaking 4 we'll be doing next year, so that corresponds with advanced. And then the mastery will be basically anything above Get Speaking 4. So everything's nicely codified in a pretty simple system. Yeah.
And I designed it in a way that in the same topic, let's say travel, but it's been graded. So for foundations level, you have the words for travel that suits in your level that you can understand.
Yeah.
So if you're listening to the foundation level and you can grasp all the words and structures, then you can move on to basic for the same topic, travel. and then you can pick up new words.
Yeah.
So that's the whole idea of making graded podcast, graded episodes, and to focus on the same topic.
Yeah.
So that you can gradually enlarge your vocabulary.
And then you even have a few that are like not just the same general topic, but the same very specific topic. Like you have 3 episodes on the same Chengyu, right? So explaining
Yes.
3 different levels, right? That's super useful too, because like say you're intermediate, but it's a bit of a stretch, right? You can do the basic. No, it wasn't basic, right? It was foundations. You can do the foundations level, which will be really easy for you at that point, and then move on to intermediate, which will be a lot more approachable. And then if you're ready for the advanced or mastery or whichever the higher one is, to stretch you a little bit. It's the same content, so it's familiar ground. Yeah, that's a really good way of doing it. We've done that. You've done that with some of our other monthly challenges too, where you had the same story or dialogue
We
with
had the
different levels. Right?
graded stories for when we were reading those essays, 散文,
Yeah, the reading comprehension one.
and the Chinese idioms, the 成语 challenge.
Yep.
We did the graded readings, and they were really helpful for students. They have really good feedback on saying that if they don't understand the intermediate or the advanced version yet, they could start it with the basic ones, grasp the idea, and then slowly build up to the level that they should be at.
Yeah. This is a good point related to like learning to understand other accents, right? It does take exposure, but I like this point about openness to differences, because I think a lot of learners especially get caught up in like, oh, it's non-standard and I'm going to look down on it, right? Or it's incorrect, they're talking wrong. And it's like, okay, well, fine. I don't talk like a news broadcaster. Most people don't. So, and
In fact,
Ash,
we got John and I have been accused of speaking dialect.
yeah.
I don't think it's that different.
Yeah. But yeah, most people aren't going to sound like bang on standard. So you definitely need some tolerance for variation and exposure to it, and openness to the difference, accepting the difference, figuring out what the difference is, right? Like going back to the Taiwan Goryeo accent, right? They have a hard time pronouncing F's, so a lot of time the F becomes a hu, right? So they say ka hui instead of cafe. You don't need to say that yourself, but you do need to like be open to learning that pattern so that you can understand that accent. If that's an accent you need to understand.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's a good. And then
The one thing
Also, like,
go ahead.
the openness thing is very important.
Yeah.
While I was watching Bilibili, the Chinese YouTube, because the YouTubers there come from all places in China, so they all come with different accents.
Yeah.
The funny thing that when you watch their videos are like in the comments, people will start to guess where they're from according to their accent. So I think that's a really good example for being openness and having open-minded for those different sounds.
Yeah.
And people would pick up because like I remember one specific host, he would say 客饭 instead of 吃饭.
客饭.
He actually used a different verb for that. So according to the comments, they said it's a very specific place, and actually it applies to different places, not just one specific place that they use 客 for to eat. So it's very interesting. And people would know if you, because the China is so big. If you're working in the tier one cities, you meet people from everywhere. So if you listen to them while they talk, it's very interesting. Sometimes they will speak standard Mandarin, so you cannot tell where they're from. But when they're talking on the phone to their families or friends back home, they will switch to the accent they usually have.
Yep,
And then you can tell where they're from.
for
I
sure.
also noticed that for myself as well. When I'm teaching or when I'm speaking properly, I will use my standard Mandarin. But if I'm talking to my family or my Taiwanese friends, I will use my Taiwanese accent.
Yeah.
Like, Ash, do you remember when I treated you as Taiwanese, so I talked to you in Taiwanese accent, and he couldn't understand me.
I got a lot of it. I just didn't get all of it. Yeah.
Yeah, it can be jarring. Well, I mean, it's not even necessarily a conscious thing, right? Like, I grew up in the deep South. I didn't have a super strong accent when I was a kid, but I had a much more noticeable Southern accent than I have now. I haven't lived there since I was 18, but when I go back, it definitely comes back. And so, like, if I go back home for a few weeks or a month, um, and come back to Japan, people are like, "Whoa, you've been back home, haven't you?" Because it just comes back, you know. So I don't even notice it until somebody says something. But um,
It's
another,
no, it's
oh,
it's
good,
notable when he says LK.
a walk,
When you say
yeah,
anything with LK,
yeah,
walk, talk.
salt,
Why say the L in salt? Salt, walk,
okay.
talk.
So it's just the LK, walk, talk,
Yeah, it's LK.
yeah.
It's like that's an L.
Something, yeah. You you can take the boy out of Pensacola, but you can't take the Pensacola out of the boy. Um, This is a good point. Variation is acquired, not learned. That's that's a great point. I mean, it's good to focus on learning your one, primary accent, but to get like to be able to understand a wide variety of accents, there's just too much. You're not gonna go um, study each regional accent in detail in order to understand it. You just need exposure. And you get good at mapping those accents that you're hearing onto your standard accent, hopefully, through exposure. But um, pronunciation of oil in the South. Yeah, we've talked about this, Ash and I.
Ac-
My dad says
yeah, that
old.
I had a I've heard a bunch of different ones, but the
Yeah.
weirdest one was this the drum I was in a heavy metal band in high school, and the drummer's brother, he was working on his car and he's pointing into the garage. He said, "Hey, can you get me that wool?" I'm like, "Wool?" And I'm looking for like a
Like wool
fabric.
cloth or
And I'm like,
something.
I don't see any wool, dude. He's like, a whole thing of wool right there. I'm like, of wool? Like WOOL? He's like, no, OIL. Like, you don't say wool, it's oil. Like, what the hell are you talking about?
Yeah. Um, let's see.
And my she's from Mississippi, and she was down in southern Mississippi, and some lady was saying furniture. It's over there on the furniture. And like my mom had no idea what this person was saying. For me, it's easy. I would immediately think, oh, they're just not saying, they're not palatalizing the sure, right? They're not, but
Right.
if you look at the spelling, it probably was originally pronounced furniture.
Furniture. Yeah, that's a common one. My band director in high school would say furniture. Um,
So we have a
thinking through.
comment there for shadowing.
Yeah, I think this is a good idea. Like, stretch yourself with harder level stuff and use lower level stuff to get volume, to get more exposure, right? If you can already understand it, it's still useful. You can squeeze more juice out of it by listening to it a bunch of times because you'll still internalize some things that you wouldn't just by listening once and understanding it. But then, yeah, using the harder episodes to like stretch yourself further is a good, that's a good approach.
Because for language learning, it's always like you understand. You should be able to understand 80% of the input, but reproduce it for 20% for the output. It's a different ratio. So you can definitely focus on different levels. For the input, always go for harder content. And for the output, you can relax a little bit, go lower, starting from the lower level, and then slowly build it up.
Yeah. Yeah. There's, we talked about this last week in our team meeting, but there's a metaphor from weightlifting where you have two levers basically, volume and intensity. And in weightlifting, intensity is defined as the percentage of your 1 rep max, which is the most you can lift for a single repetition, right? So that's the definition of intensity. Now, obviously, the higher the intensity, like if you're lifting 95% of your max, you might only get 2 or 3 reps, right? And if you're lifting 80% of your max, you might get 10 reps. But so they've done a lot of studies on this, and you need some, to improve your strength, you need some amount of high intensity work. The problem is high intensity work is extremely fatiguing, not just muscularly, but neurally, right? And then, so what a lot of people do is they'll do a bit of really high intensity stuff to drive that strength improvement, but that's not enough on its own. You need a large volume to drive muscular adaptation. So the metaphor here is, right, the intense stuff is what pushes you forward, but it only works up to a certain amount, and so you need lots of volume. The volume is way easier on your body. So the metaphor here is working through stuff that is at a higher level than what you can currently understand. That's the intense work, right? But then putting on some stuff that you've already worked through or that you can already understand, putting that on in the background and just practicing listening and understanding to it, listening to it and understanding it, that's volume. And you really need both. You can only do so much intense work per day. 10 minutes, 20 minutes maybe, if it's truly intense. But if you've blocked off an hour to study, right, you need to do something that will fill in that volume and that won't burn you out and exhaust you. So yeah, that's a good way of doing that, is, listening intensively to difficult stuff and then putting on easier stuff for volume.
I would like to suggest our listeners, if you're listening to the advanced content or the content that's harder than your level, what you can do is you can intensely listening to just one paragraph. Focus on one paragraph first. So we can divide one episode into different parts. And while you listen, just focus on the 5W1H question. Just ask yourself what you heard from that paragraph. So who, what, when, where, how, why. Yeah, I missed one thing. Yeah.
Who, what, when, where, why.
Well, focusing on those things first, and then you can slowly fill in the puzzle for that paragraph.
Yeah.
And slowly you'll build up the confidence and you'll build up the ability for listening harder content.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, Ash needs to step out. He's got limited time today, but Christine, you and I can continue. Thanks for your time, Ash. We'll see you hopefully next week.
Thank
Yep.
you, Ash.
Yep. See ya. Bye.
There we go. Let's look at. There's several other comments. Let's scroll through and take a look. Oh yeah, try to learn the most international version of a language, then you can travel and be understood everywhere. Yeah, we talked about that a bit earlier, but yeah, that's if I think that's the way to go. If you don't have a good reason to learn a very specific variety, then that's absolutely what you should do. You know, I wanted to sound specifically Taiwanese and not standard sort of PRC or international Mandarin because I was living in Taiwan. But again, you know, pretty much everybody can understand a good Taiwanese accent, so there's no issue there. But yeah, I mean, the standard variety or a widely accepted as normal variety, or you could call it prestige dialect or whatever. Foreigners always sound weird when trying to speak slang. Yep. Well, because without the cultural knowledge and the massive exposure to it, it's kind of hard to use it the right way, right?
Well, I have to say, if you learn the intonation right, that what we mentioned earlier on,
Yep.
even if you don't understand what it means, if you get the intonation right, people will still think, oh yeah, that's impressive. But why
Yeah,
did you say that?
that's a good point. Yeah, because like yeah, the whole intonation and accent thing. Ash has an idea he calls language credit, right? And it's, do native speakers give you credit for being competent in the language, right? So if you don't have much language credit, say if you have a super strong accent, right, and you struggle to express yourself, even if you use some slang perfectly, it's going to come off really weird because it doesn't fit in with the rest of your ability, right? But if you have a native sounding accent and most of your usage sounds native, and you know, then if you use slang, it's not going to come off weird because you get credit already. They already think of you as a competent speaker, so it's not going to sound weird, or as weird at least, to use slang. They might be surprised that you can use it, but you know, the more native and natural you sound overall, the less weird it's going to sound for you to try to use slang and whatnot.
We have a previous comment about in song lyrics for tones.
Yeah, I was looking for that one. I
It's
saw it.
at the very beginning.
Oh, right. Yeah, let me. Got a lot of comments in the chat. That's awesome. Thought music would be great for listening comprehension, but then I realized tones sort of go out the window. Great for vocab, though. I hear rap music keeps the tones. Any thoughts on that? Does it? It does keep the tones, right?
It does keep the tones because rap is more like speaking.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah, that's totally right, Stephanie. Mandarin music doesn't generally preserve tones in any way. Some native speakers will say it does, but that's because they're processing the tones because they already know the words, right? Their mind is picking up on tones. It's not actually in the music. I know a lot of people, even non-native speakers, will want to fight me on it. You can fight me on it. I'm a musician. There's no tones in Mandarin music.
No tones.
Yeah, but rap for sure. Yeah. If you, who would you recommend as a rapper to MC Hot Dog or?
Yeah, MC Hot Dog. That's the person I can think of.
Yeah, I'm sure there's plenty in the PRC. MC Hot Dog is super popular in Taiwan.
Oh yeah, if you listen to the PRC rappers, they will have Chinese accent. They will have the PRC accent.
For
I
sure.
can
Yeah.
be really stronger for me, as for
Yeah.
me, harder to understand.
Yeah. And there is some like non-rap kind of pop music where some tones will be preserved. Like for example, Make Way, which is a band from Beijing, although the singer is from, I think he's from Harbin. Um, he will say some of the lyrics. So he'll go back and forth between speaking with tones, and they're usually really exaggerated, and then singing without tones. So that's kind of an edge case, though. The vast majority of Mando pop and rock and stuff is not going to have tones whatsoever. I lived in Australia. I spoke like a New Zealander, and when in New Zealand, everyone thought I was Australian. Yeah, accents are fluid, you know. I didn't actively. Oh, my video just. Yeah, we're both going back and forth to see if our video is working right.
Yeah.
It cut out for a second. Accents are really fluid. Like I didn't actively try to lose my Southern accent. It just happened. I lived in Boston. Probably subconsciously, I felt like my accent stuck out like a sore thumb, and so that's probably why I started to lose it. But I wasn't trying to lose it, right? Um, yeah, if you move, you're likely to shift your accent at least a little bit, and then it'll come back with a vengeance when you go back to where you used to live. Um,
When when I lived in London, my accent started to. When I first arrived, people all thought I'm American, and later on, after a few years, I could talk like them. And when I first came back to Taiwan, my accent sounded very British.
mm,
But slowly, after I worked with Outliers and working with other Americans, my accent switched to the American accent again. Well, it is fluid and it is acquired. Like one of our comments before previously, right? If you're in the region, you will switch your accent to the region. That's what I do. That's what I do most of the time.
yeah. And I think in a non-native language, it's probably much more fluid, right? Because you don't have decades and decades of your accent built up that you're fighting against, right? It's a
Right,
native
right.
language. So like I do think if I were to move to Beijing, my accent would shift probably pretty quickly.
Mm.
Um, but
When I was
if I moved to London, that wouldn't be the
when I
case.
lived in Beijing, yeah.
Yeah.
When I lived in Beijing, it was really hard for me to produce the accent. I needed to try it very hard. If I use my standard accent, people would think I'm a Southerner. I'm
Yeah.
from the South.
Yep.
But if I want to try really hard to produce the accent, I got tired very quickly. So
Yeah.
sometimes I would just stay with my Southern accent,
Yeah.
the standard one, so that people cannot tell where I'm from.
Yeah. You don't have as much muscle memory built up for that
Mm.
Beijing accent. Um, yeah, that's true, Mike. One of the benefits of having a music degree is I can pull rank on that discussion. Um, yeah, I think that's what it is. Native speakers, they're hearing the tones because that's how they process the language. I think non-native speakers, by and large, think of tones as something separate from the rest of the syllable, right? You've got consonants and vowels and tones, right? So the tone is something you add on to the syllable. For a native speaker, it's much more fundamental than that. It's like we were talking about earlier with sentence level intonation. Tones in Mandarin are like that. So there's no thinking of the language or understanding a line in a song without your brain processing tones because it's just that fundamental a part of the language.
But I also have to say that's probably a generation thing, because I don't want, when I listen to pop music,
Mm.
if I don't read the lyrics, I don't understand what they're talking about or singing about,
Well,
because
you
all the
probably get
tones are
most of it,
gone.
right? You probably get most of it, but miss out on a few words here and there, right?
But
Because
I usually miss the keywords.
yeah. That's exactly. That reminds me of when people say like, "Oh, if you know 100 characters, you'll understand 50% of Chinese language text," and it's like, no, you won't. You might recognize 50% of the characters in the text, right? But understanding is a whole different thing because it's like, uh, okay, if you understand a sentence, well, if you hear a sentence and all you know is a, the, and, by,
Yeah.
those are super frequent words, but you're not going to understand anything that's going on in that sentence.
It's like when
Um,
I learned Japanese kana, I could read almost everything, but I have no clue.
yeah. Yeah, that's. I've noticed a lot of Japanese people will, if they're texting me in Japanese, they'll use 100% hiragana and katakana because they're like, oh, that's easier for foreigners. Foreigners struggle with kanji, right? So they'll type like this, and I'm like, I don't know what any of this says, but if so, I tell people like the more kanji you can use, the better, because like even if I don't know how it's pronounced in Japanese, I'll probably know what it means
Right.
because it's likely to be a Chinese loanword or something, right?
Yeah.
Or if not, then I can at least figure out the meaning in the sentence. But yeah, they type all phonetically. It's just like what I can't understand it at all. But
Yeah.
yeah,
So
native speakers have a
going
different conception of what's hard than what non-native
going
speakers.
back to listening.
Yeah.
So when I learned kana, even if I could read everything, I wouldn't be able to understand. But there are a lot of loan words from Chinese. So if it's for the listening material,
Mm.
I could guess what they're talking about.
A lot of times, yeah. There's been many times that I've heard a word that I didn't know in Japanese, but just from context and from sort of knowing sound relationships between Mandarin and Japanese, a lot of times I can fill in the gaps and go like, oh, I bet this is such and such word, and later I'll look it up and confirm it. But
Yeah.
yeah, knowing Chinese is kind of a superpower when it comes to learning Japanese.
Actually, when I learned Thai, I found Thai is very similar. It has some loan words from
Mm,
Chinese,
mm.
and the structure is fairly easy. So for listening, you'll be able to understand what they're talking about, even though the characters are hard to, or the alphabet are
Yeah,
harder to read.
I've heard
But
that
when you
too.
listen to it, it's easier.
And there's a guy, Stuart J. Raj, who I guess has lived in Thailand for a long time. He's Australian. um, he also speaks Mandarin and Cantonese, but I think his Thai is like way better than those two languages. But he talks about learning Thai tones by referring to Middle Chinese tone categories.
Mm,
And I always thought, like, no, there's no way. These are two unrelated languages. It's not. But I looked it up and it's like, actually, yeah, like you said, there's a lot of Chinese loan words. And so a
it's
lot of
related.
the Middle Chinese tone category does come into things. That's super interesting to me. I didn't realize that.
When I was learning Thai, the teacher said that we can use Thai tones to mark all the tones in Chinese and in a very actual punctuate sound for
Mm,
that.
yeah. This is a good question. What's the degree of similarity between kanji and hanzi? Um, Visual similarity, it's very high. So um, most Japanese kanji are identical to their traditional Chinese counterpart. Some of the simplifications are the same as the PRC simplified characters. not not many of them, but some of them are identical, and some of them are really similar. Um, to the point that it's like if you know traditional or even simplified Chinese, kanji are pretty easy to learn. But actually, what like that helps a lot when learning Japanese. But what helps even more is having a big vocabulary in Chinese, because, well, there's the old joke that English is three languages in a trench coat. It's not actually its own language. Japanese is totally like that, because it's like Japanese is these days, I guess it's probably 30% or more Chinese loanwords, probably 30% or more English and other language loanwords, mostly English, but also a few from Portuguese and French and a few others. Um, and then what's left over, maybe 30%, probably less, is native Japanese words. For me, that's the hardest part of the language to learn, is because I know most of the Chinese loanwords. Most of the time they mean the same thing or something very similar in Japanese. Like there are certainly exceptions, but um, if you reach a high degree of ability in Japanese or in Chinese and then come to Japan, you can kind of function. You can read signs, you can make sense of newspaper articles a little bit. Take some practice, but it's a massive advantage. Um, they've found that native Chinese speakers learn Japanese something like twice as fast as people that don't speak Chinese natively, and it's because of all the loanwords and the writing system. So, yeah, huge advantage. People always ask me which one's harder, Mandarin or Japanese, and I always just say they're equally difficult, I think, but in different ways. So which one's harder is going to be whichever one you learn first. The other one's going to be much easier.
Mm,
Yeah.
right, right.
Well, we've talked about a lot of stuff that's not listening. Do you have any other thoughts on listening?
Well, I do have questions for our listeners.
Mm.
I would like to ask our audience, what levels are you listening to right now, and what other topics or what other levels are interested in?
Yeah, definitely. We wanna build this podcast in a way that's useful for you guys and not just like what we want to put in, right? So we definitely want to hear from you. What levels? Because if there's a clear majority of people that are listening to specific levels, we'll know to make more of those and less of the others. So, and then topics for sure. Like we did a poll in the community, right, where a few people suggested some
Yes.
topics, and then you did those topics, right, in the first 60.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, and I'm sort of filling the space here because there's a lag between when we talk and when they hear us. So it may take a while for them to actually answer in the chat. Um,
That's
but
okay.
similarly, if you guys have, like I said earlier, if you guys have topics you want us to talk about in these live streams, let us know, because we're happy to take requests. Can
At
understand
first,
10% with subtitles, but only 70% without. Oh. Oh, that's with Japanese, I think, right? Because you're saying if you want to
yeah.
experience linguistic schizophrenia, then learn Japanese. Oh, that's totally true. When I read Japanese, the words that I know in Japanese, those are in Japanese in my head. The words that I don't know in Japanese yet, they're in Chinese. If it's a common word. Like, so when I read, my mental voice is like a mishmash of Japanese and Chinese. Let's see, still in the foundation phase, about 500 characters. If you're at 500 characters, you could probably start doing some of the basic, I would think. Don't you think, Christine?
Yeah, you can do basic.
It'll
I
be a
think so.
stretch. Like it'll be a challenge, but it's probably worth spending some portion of your time on that. Like the bulk of your time, I think, should be spent at a comfortable level. But for that intensity, like I was talking about earlier, go up to basic and see how you do with it. It'll take you longer to work through each episode, but um, yeah, Stephanie, high beginner, maybe 500 words. I know my level is limited, but I would love to learn more about how to express my emotions and my personality. It's something I can't really do at all. That takes practice.
We have similar episodes, so maybe you can focus on those ones for characters and personalities, hobbies, like that.
Yeah, yeah. And expressing emotion, obviously, like learning the words for I'm happy, I'm sad, I'm angry is one thing, but actually being able to be angry in a foreign language, that takes practice.
Right,
um,
right.
I remember, I forget what happened, but I got angry at somebody, uh, and I was trying to chew them out in Chinese, but I found my anger got in the way of me being able to speak Chinese whatsoever. So I was just stumbling all over myself. Um, so actually, Ash talks about practicing being angry in Chinese. Come up with a scenario, figure out what you want to say, practice saying it in an angry way, so that at least you'll have some practice with it. So that when it happens, you might be a little better at it. And that's not just anger; it's any emotion really. Emotions will get in the way of your expressiveness, um, unless you have really practiced it or you're at a very high level. So
I would suggest shadowing from TV series or movies. That
yes,
definitely help for practicing emotions.
absolutely, yeah, yeah. Find scenes that are expressing the types of emotions that you're having difficulty with, and practice those. Really, we talked about muscle memory earlier. Repetition is the key. Like, it's not enough to study your textbook and memorize the words and the grammar patterns and all that. You need lots of repetition. That's one thing I think language learning has gotten away from in the last couple of decades is putting in the hard work of doing your reps. Like if you look at the FSI, the old FSI courses, um, that I forget the name of the method that they used. Audiolingual, is that the one? Where there's lots of like drills and like repetition and like substitution drills and things like that, right? Those old FSI courses were extremely effective because they put such a high premium on oral repetition and not just memorizing a bunch of words. Um, it's not fun. So I think that's why a lot of like second language acquisition theory has gotten away from that because, um,
It's not fun, but it's useful and it,
yeah,
it really works.
it's as effective as it gets. It's just, yeah, you just have to put in the practice.
We have one
Um,
comment for intermediate level.
yeah,
Well,
intermediate,
okay,
hard to
we
suggest.
can we can.
That's fine. Yeah, I mean, if you guys think of anything that you want to learn, any topics you want us to cover, post in the community. We'll be happy to do it. Um, takes a lot of practice. Definitely check out the podcast. Limited vocabulary, not losing the tones when I'm angry and excited. That's totally another element. Um, you know, no matter how much you've practiced the tones as a non-native speaker, if you're pissed off, you're not going to have tones unless you've really like drilled it a lot. So uh, emotions really can trip you up.
Well,
Requires,
just try that in front of your mirror before you actually do it. Pick
yeah,
up
yeah.
the phrases you need, and I would say have three phrases ready to go, and at least you won't go off. We won't go wrong when you say those ones.
Yeah, yeah. Set phrases help. Yeah, this is good. How dare you? Who do you think you are? Get a life. Those are fairly mild, but yeah. Learning a few well-placed curse words can be very helpful too. Because at least, well, it depends. If you
Okay,
use it and people laugh at you, you're just gonna get more angry. So
right.
yeah, be careful with that, I
And
guess.
one
But yeah, language
one thing
islands is a
about
good point.
one thing about set phrase is that because there are regional differences, that's the thing in my concern. Because once you learn the ones, for example, you learn how to express that specific emotion in Taiwan,
Mm.
but that probably doesn't mean the same thing in China.
Yeah.
And
That's
I
a
don't want to put you in that situation to get confused or
yeah,
confusing people.
that's a great point. Anger is expressed very differently in different regions.
Mm.
Like if you go to Beijing and you're angry and you say "Guo ga li gong," they're
Well,
not gonna have
that's not useful. Yeah.
they're gonna
So,
have
huh?
no
What?
idea. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, some set phrases that are fairly universal, that's really useful. And language island.
Mm.
That's we talk about language islands in our December challenge. So if anybody's interested in that, but it's basically setting up like you start with um, like a language island can be something you're interested in, right? So if you're interested in music, you learn a little bit. You prepare like a paragraph where you can say, "I really love listening to music. My favorite genre is rock." Blah 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 blah. Right, and then over time you add to that. So you learn how to talk about all your favorite artists. So you're building a little island of ability all around the topic of discussing music. And then when you're in a conversation with somebody, you can sort of try to steer the conversation toward your islands, right? So if somebody's talking about movies and you don't have very much movie vocabulary, you can go, "Oh, what movie has your favorite score?" Or what movie do you really enjoy listening to the soundtrack of? "Oh yeah, I love that too because I really love rock." And you can kind of steer the conversation toward your island. So yeah, anyone that's interested in that sort of thing, keep an eye out. At the end of November, we'll announce the December challenge. But that's what we'll cover in December.
And I
Um,
think the language island idea is really important. When I'm designing courses or materials, I will focus on language, so building up language islands for you,
yeah,
and you can pick which one that's suitable for you. Even if it's in the podcast episode for different topics, I'll provide different vocabulary for you and different expressions that you can use to express yourself. And especially for our Get Speaking Mandarin 3, for different lessons, I actually build it up for like the language island idea.
mm,
So each lesson focus on different topic,
yeah,
and I provide enough of vocabulary for you to talk about that topic. So you can pick the topic that you like, and you'll be able to talk about that.
mm,
And like John said, you can, no matter what kind of conversation you're in, you can always steer back to where you're familiar with.
yeah. And if that sounds like it's going to be forced, it doesn't come across that way in conversation. As long as you're able to find a natural path between the current topic and your island, it's going to feel natural because that's how conversations flow anyway. Um, yeah, Stephanie's going to be screaming at herself in the mirror to practice. I, that's what it takes. Many books on how to tell off people, how to be angry, etc. It's a useful skill. Having a class on clips from series, movies, etc. on high emotion interaction would be great. Yeah, I agree. We have a slot. We have a couple more monthly challenge slots available, right?
Yes, we can
Maybe maybe we could do that for
design
one of them.
something for
I think
that.
we have some already, but we can talk about doing that or just making a separate course, not a challenge. But yeah,
In
that's
our
a
movie
good idea.
course, both of the movie course, because we have each week we will select lines for you to practice to chorus. So I specifically selected a few that's in shouting mode or in the angry mode
Yeah.
that you can practice with that emotion, because those are the emotions that you don't regularly come across with
Right.
during your real life conversation.
Yeah. Yeah. That 让子弹飞 specifically has a lot of kind of over the top emotion scenes, but
Those are
extreme
good to practice.
fear, anger. Yeah. Yeah. It's great.
Really good.
I'm thinking of the 惊喜 scene. 什么叫
Yeah,
惊
yeah, that was.
One person's threatening, the other person's fearful. It's a great scene for that. Yeah, if you use 岂有此理 in an argument, you might get some weird looks.
Yeah, that's what I thought. I thought, wow, you're very literal,
Yeah,
very educated.
literary.
I
Yeah,
would just use a swear word to
yeah.
replace that.
All right, I want to scroll through and see if we've missed any questions or comments that we should address, and if not, then we should probably go ahead and wrap pretty soon.
Okay.
Unless, do you have any other things that you want to talk about related to listening comprehension?
Not right now, but I think it's, if you have any comments or suggestions, just leave us a comment or contact us.
Yeah, you can post a comment on this video, or you can, you know, even better would be join the community. So there's a link in the description where you can join the community if you're not in there already. And yeah, just comment there, and we'll be happy to take those ideas and you know, make podcast episodes out of them, or future live streams, depending on. Let's see. Yeah, this is a good point. Language being a whole system, improving one thing will improve others, but every particular thing still needs special attention. Yeah, that's totally true. Yeah, improving your listening. Well, improving your reading can definitely help improving your listening, but not, you know, only to a certain extent, right? Because knowing new vocabulary is definitely helpful. But if you're getting blocked in listening because of the speed, then you know, learning new vocabulary is not going to really help you with listening comprehension speed. So yeah, everything needs specific practice. Let's see. I think we've addressed everything. Oh, hey, normal for Cantonese, 岂有此理. Okay, I wouldn't be surprised there. I don't know Cantonese.
That makes sense.
But yeah,
That makes sense.
yeah,
Because
yeah.
my Hong Kong friend would say 岂有此理, but they just translate it directly from Cantonese.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, yeah. What about humor? That can also be really regional.
And depends on the it would depend on the time. So
Yeah,
a lot of the humor are time sensed, time concerned, or it's time consuming because it's only valid for this period of time. So after
because a lot of humor
certain
is
time.
like cultural references and stuff, right?
Right, or like these days are a lot of internet slangs or
Yeah.
internet incidents that becomes the memes or
Right.
the humor for that, unless you're using the classical ones.
Sure. Yeah, humor can move quickly for sure. But yeah, like watching comedies and stuff, that'll get you into at least into the mode of what normally passes for humor in the language you're learning. Even if what's specifically funny might change from month to month.
For humor and sarcasm, it needs time to build up, and you need to build up a lot of background knowledge behind it so that you will be able to understand.
Yeah.
And you need to understand the context first, then you will be able to use that.
And I would also say there are some things that are like culturally, well, like puns in English, people might find them funny, but they're just as likely to like roll their eyes or groan and like, oh, come on, man, you know. Whereas Chinese speakers seem to really like puns. Like a good pun is always welcome if it's well executed.
Yes.
Yeah, there's different types of things that are found funny in different cultures, but yeah, it takes a lot of exposure for sure. All right, guys, I think we've covered everything. I think we've addressed all the questions that need to be addressed. So we'll go ahead and wrap up. Christine and I are both in rental spaces, so we've got to clear out soonish. Thanks for coming to this. Yeah, Mike says thanks for making the time to do this. For the foreseeable future, I think we're going to try to do this every week, or you know, we may skip a week here and there, but we'll definitely be doing it same time next week, where we'll talk about speaking. And we, you know, obviously we covered a little bit of stuff about speaking this week, but we'll focus on that next week. So that'll be a fun one. Hope to see you guys then, or in our Q&As if you're in the courses that have Q&As coming up. And definitely, if you're not in the community, come join us. Anger is easier than humor, probably in some ways, yeah.
Probably, yeah.
Probably
yeah.
in some ways, yeah.
Started
Humor
with that.
takes a lot of cultural knowledge to pull off well. So, all right, guys. Well, thanks for coming, and we hope to see you next week. And
Thank you.
Community. Thanks to Christine for taking the time. And
谢谢。
再见。
再见。